We'll do a review. Mamorim Meluke. This is the 10th mamer um, from Shabbos Pashas Haazinu in the order of this Mamorim Meluke in V'chaylik. This is the 10th mamer. The Rebbe said this mamer in Shabbos Pashas Haazinu, Shabbos Shuva in Tovshin Chav Gimel. The mamer V'chol Odom Lo Yiyeh Bo'el Moed B'Voyel L'Chaper B'Kodesh. This mamer is a hemshech, as it says in the note in the bottom, of the very first mimer we learned in Yivchar Lonus Nachalosenu, which the Rebbe also said for Rosh Hashanah, and then later on he said this mimer. This was published in the Kuntras Vav Tishrei Tovshin Nun Aleph Tinosei, and this was in honor of Vav Tishrei, which is the yahrzeit of the Rebbetzin, the Rabbanis Tzidkonis Moros Chana, Tehein Nishmosei Tzurur B'Tzrei L'Chaim, the mother of Yibod L'Chaim Tovim of the Rebbe. And she passed away on Shabbos Shuva at Mincha time in the year Tavshin Chav Hei, above Tishrei. This date on this Maimer that it was published is Vav Tishrei in the year Tinosei, the year Tavshin and Aleph. So the Maimer is a continuation to the Maimer that preceded this, which is the Maimer that the Rebbe spoke Yivchar Lonu of Rosh Hashanah of that year of Tavshin Chav Gimel, which is the first Maimer actually in this series. In any event, in this Maimer, the Rebbe explains first the great presence of the divine that was in the Beis Hamikdash, and especially after the Kohen Gadol did his avodah, in which even the Malachim were not able to withstand it. They could not be in the Ohel Moed, as we will learn. And that's the great avodah. That took place through the avodah. The Rebbe discusses the avodah of the number 8. 8 represents higher than Ishtalshlus, and the Rebbe points out to the various different levels of higher than Ishtalshlus, and that at the highest level, when the Yom Kippur, when the avodah of the Kohen Gadol, he went in and he made the 8 sprinkles, achas l'maylo v'sheva l'mata, 1 on the top and 7 below, then that's a much higher level of higher the Ishtalshlus. The number 8 over here, the ches comes before the zayin, the aleph comes before the zayin, as the Rebbe will explain. And then the Rebbe goes through to explain how the power of tshuva works on a higher level, even, and the Rebbe explains it by Merzal, and various other inyanim over here of the level 8 and how it pertains to the different levels. We'll go step by step. B'siyayta d'shmaya, Shabbos Parshas Haazinu, Shabbos Tshuva, Hey Tovshin Chavgil. So the Rebbe quotes the pasuk in the parsha in Achrei Mois. It says, "V'chol adam lo yiyeh bo'el moed b'voyel l'chaper b'kodesh gomer." So no person shall be in the tent of meeting when the Kohen Gadol goes to atone b'kodesh. He goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. No person was allowed to be in the Ohel Moed then. Gomer. That's what the pasuk says. Who does it refer to? All people. That normally means human beings, but the Rishalmi says that this also includes all people when it says Cholodom, afilu oisum shekosov bahem, even those about by whom it's written, udemus pneihem pnei odom, the image of their face was the face of man, which means they weren't really Odom, they just had a face of Odom. They were Malachim. These Malachim who had a face of Adam, their face image is an image of a face of a human. So the Yerushalmi says they are included in not being allowed. That means that the angels were also not permitted to be in the Ohel Moed. Even those who even the angels could not be in the Ohel Moed when the Kohen Gadol went in to the Kodesh to atone for the Bnei Yisrael. Umavayir had Tzemach Tzedek b'Mamore Dibur Masel Zeh. So the Tzemach Tzedek in the mamer, which opens with the same opening, he's Mavayir. Uh, this is in Neira Torah and Drushi Yom Kippurim. So he's Mavayir. שהגילוי שנמשך כשכהן גודל היה נכנס לכהן הקודש הקדושים, that the revelation that was extended at the time when the Kohen Gadol went into the Holy of Holies, when he went to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the revelation that came down then, Hogilu Shalamayla Mehishtalshalus, that's a revelation which is higher than Hishtalshalus. And therefore, uh, nobody could be in there, even the Malachim could not, as the Rebbe will explain, could not stand that great gilu, so they couldn't be there. And he brings down like we find in the Medrash on the verse. It says Bezois Yove Arin. But Pashtus, meaning with this, he has to have the procedures of all the korbanos that the Pasuk discusses in the Parshas Achrei Mos. With this, he goes in. But in the Medrash, it says Bezois Yove Arin. What merit, with what merit did Aaron enter into the room of the Kodesh HaKadoshim? And the answer is that it is Zchus Hamila Hoysa Nechnases Imay. That the Bezois is referencing also the merit of circumcision. Because the Kohen Gadol had the bris was the merit, and it goes into him. That's how he enters into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Umila, so we see that in order to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you need the Zechus of Mila. Now, when we talk about the Zechus of Mila, is Mila Nitna B'Shmini. That means the 8th day of the child is when we make a bris. It was given on the 8th day. The Shmini Hulemaila Mehishtalshlus. Shmini, 7 represents the 7 days of the week, the Stalshlus. That cycle, that's Ishtalshlus. The number 8, which is the day that the bris takes place, that was given a Shmini, is higher. That's the number 8, higher than Ishtalshlus. So we see Shmini is higher than Ishtalshlus. So we see, in order for the Kohen Gadol to enter into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he needed to be in a level of higher than Ishtalshlus, which was the bris, which is Shmini, which is higher than Ishtalshlus. So that means that the Gilui in the Kodesh HaKadoshim is L'mayla Mishtalshlus. That's why the Kohen Gadol needs to have a Zechus from L'mayla Mishtalshlus, the Mila that was given B'Shmini, to enter into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Shmini hu L'mayla Mishtalshlus. Where do we see also another place that the idea of Mila is higher than Ishtalshlus is given b'Shmini? That's also, we find it in the Medrash. The Medrash says, Ala Posik, it says, Soid Havaya Lireov. The secret of Havaya, the secret of Hashem to those who fear Him. What secret of Hashem are we talking about over here? So the Medrash explains the secret of Hashem means the level of Hishtalshlus, where Hashem comes down to Hishtalshlus, that's a revealed level. There is a level of higher than Hishtalshlus. That's called the secret of Hashem, because it's not revealed. So the secret of Hashem to those who fear Him means, says the Medrash, the level of bris, because the bris is higher than Hishtalshlus. Look inside. Soid Havaya Lireyo. Ezeu Soid Havaya, which is the secret of Havaya, Zumila. Why? Why is Milah considered the secret of Hashem? Because Milah is higher than Ishtalshalus. Shagiluyim, the Ishtalshalus, heim mibechinas galya de kutshabrich. The revelation that come in Ishtalshalus, they come from the level of the revealed part of kutshabrich, which is the level that comes down in Ishtalshalus in Begilui. Bagilui. The revelation that comes through Mila is from Sosim of Kuchurich. And that's why we call it in the Pasuk Soid Havai L'Reov, because Mila is the secret of Havai, because it's the Gilui of higher than it's higher than the Gilui. It's from the level of Sosim. The Soid Hu Mashu Sosim V'Nel. The secret is that is closed and obscure. We don't see. So that means that it's not in Ishtalshalus. It's higher than Ishtalshalus. Al Koponim, we see that Mila is higher than Ishtalshalus. It was given on the 8th day. It's the secret of Hashem. It's all Ishtalshalus. So the Kohen Gadol needed that zechus in order to enter in to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. When he went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Nimshach Hagilui the Soid Havaya. So then the revelation of the secret of Hashem, of higher than Ishtalshalus, was extended. It came down in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Soid Havaya. And because it was such a great Gilui when the Kohen Gadol entered, V'lochein, Loi hoyo shom afilu oisom shekosu b'emud mus parei p'nei odom. That's why in the Oyel Moed there could not even be even those which are just, which of whom it's written that their image was Odom, they weren't Odom, also they could not be there, because we're talking about a Gilui of higher than Ishtalshlus. Ki legabe Gilui zeh. Because when we have that Gilui, it's stuck in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, but it apparently goes to the Oyel Moed as well. Because Cholodum Liya B'Oyel Moed, look, he's not talking about in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Anyways, nobody enters there, just the Kohen Gadol. But you can't even be in the Oyel Moed when there is such a great Gilui. Kilegabe Gilui Zein Mokum L'Nivroim. For this, there's no place for created beings, so they cannot be there at that level. Even not the angels whose face is only a face of, but they're not really Odom. Even there, like the Yerushalmi says, they also can't be there. When the Kohen Gadol came in to the Kodesh HaKadoshim with the Slus of the Milah, and then the Soid Hashem Lirev was revealed in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, there could be no Nivroim, no Malachim even, because of the intense light of above. The Rebbe wants to bring out now that the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol brought about a higher level of higher than Ishtalshlus than was ordinarily in the Kodesh HaKadosh. So that in generally, even before the Kohen Gadol went in to do his Avodah at Yom Kippur, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, there was a Gilui of higher than Ishtalshlus. But that Gilui of higher than Ishtalshlus, as the Rebbe will explain, had a shaykhis to Ishtalshlus. And therefore, the Odom, Pneim, the Mus Pneim, the Malachim, they could be there. Because it's take higher than Ishtalshlus, but it has a shaykhis to Ishtalshlus. Whereas when the Kohen Gadol went in on Yom Kippur into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, And he did his avodah of sprinkling the 8 and 7, 1 and 78. The higher ishtalshlus is a much higher level. So the Rebbe will prove that since the angels were in the Oyel Moyed throughout the year, not when the Kohen Gadol was avodah seen, we see that the Kodesh HaKadoshim was on a lower level than higher than Ishtalshalus. The fact that the Kohen Gadol came in, he brought down even a higher level than higher Ishtalshalus. Let's look inside. We need to understand. The mezeh shebichdei shahakohen gadol yuchal likonos lekodesh hakadoshim huadei zuchus hamila. The fact we're saying that the kohen gadol needed the privilege of mila to get in there, shenitna b'shmini. Why does he need the higher than ishtalshlus, that level of shmini, the higher level, to get into the kodesh hakadoshim? Meaning that the kohen muchach, so it's evident. Shahagilui the lamaila mi ishtalshlus shahoyi b'kodesh hakadoshim u'mitzad mailus kodesh hakadoshim asim. So that is evident that the revelation of higher ishtalshlus that was in kodesh hakadoshim even before the Kohen Gadol was there was because the kodesh hakadoshim in itself is higher than ishtalshlus. That's what we say. The Kohen Gadol can't go into a place like the Kodesh HaKadoshim without the schus of Milah, without the schus of higher than Ishtalshlus. So that means that the Kodesh HaKadoshim on its own is higher than Ishtalshlus. If the Kohen Gadol is to go in there, he needs a schus. What's the schus? Is Milah of higher than Ishtalshlus. It doesn't mean that when the Kohen Gadol threw the entrance of the Kohen Gadol, Kodesh HaKadoshim, that's when the Gilui came down. No, it was there before. He couldn't get in there without this Gilui. Bafo became. And yet, so the Kodesh HaKadoshim always had the Gilui of higher than Ishtalshlus. But Zeh shebechol odom lo yiyeh goymer, afilu oisim shekoso behem demus, udmus pnei odom. So this that we're saying, no person can enter. Even those who we write about them, they just look the image, which is the angels. That's only the pasuk restricts and said that nobody was there when the Kohen Gadol came into the Kodesh HaKadoshim L'chaper B'Kodesh. So how could they be there before? So mizeh move on. Shahagilui shenimshach al yidei ha'avodah the Kohen Gadol b'Kodesh HaKadoshim. So from this we can understand that the revelation that extended through the avodah of the Kohen Gadol b'Kodesh HaKadoshim hunai leyoser ma'agilui shahoye b'Kodesh HaKadoshim esad atzmai. That's on a higher level than the Kodesh HaKadoshim had by its own. Kodesh HaKadoshim on its own also was higher than Ishtalshlus. That's why the Kohen Gadol needed to have a zchus to be able to get in there in higher Ishtalshlus. But that level of higher Ishtalshlus did not interfere with the Malachim being there. They could still be there. But through the avodah of the Kohen Gadol, that brought down a higher level of Ishtalshlus. A higher level than higher than Ishtalshlus, within higher than Ishtalshlus. And when that was nimshach through the avodah of the Kohen Gadol, that is when nobody could be there, not even the Malachim, which only their image is the Musam, is the Muspaneim is Panei Odom. So the Rebbe is going to explain in Ois Beis that there is various different levels in higher than Ishtalshlus. He's going to take the show how the number 8 represents in different areas, but the highest level is when achas l'mayla v'sheva l'mata. The Rebbe is going to explain sometimes the 8th comes after 7. So first you have the 7, then you have 8. But the avodah of the Kohen Gadol of the sprinkling. Over there it was the reverse. It was achas, and then comes sheva, because achas, which is higher than sheva, means it's totally a higher madreg. It doesn't connect to Ishtalshlus. And that's why the angels couldn't be there, as opposed to the regular level that we're saying that the Kodesh HaKadoshim, or Mila, that the Kohen Gadol needs to get into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That's a level of Shmini, which is 8, but it's after 7, and it has a connection to Ishtalshlus, and the angels can be there. Let's look inside. Base. Yuvon Zeh, Api HaMavuar, B'HaMaimer. So the Rebbe says we'll explain there, based on what's explained in the Maimer. This is over there in earlier, that the tshuva v'kapora heim bebchinas shmini shalamaylo meishtalshlus. Over there in the Maimer, the Rebbe discusses that both the level of tshuva is what you do, and kapora is what you receive. That's the atonement. So both tshuva and kapora heim bebchinas shmini shalamaylo meishtalshlus. They're on the level of shmini, which is Ishtalshlus. As the Rebbe points out in the note over here, as tshuva kapora, the Rebbe says, the tshuva that brings kapora, meaning that brings healing, because the Rebbe brings down that heim bebchinas shmini shelamaylo meishtalshlus, that both teshuva that we do, where it reaches, and the atonement that we receive through tshuva is in the level of shmini, shelamaylo meishtalshlus. Why? Because teshuva, the gedolah tshuva, shemevia refuah loylo. Tshuva brings a healing to the world. The world, when we don't do the right things, we commit, do an aveda, so then the world gets sick. When you do teshuva, you are healing the world. Urefuah kava'ua b'shminis, in the brachas of the Amida. So over there, the 8th bracha is refuah, because refuah comes from the level, the refuah that comes through teshuva, that the teshuva that brings refuah is in the 8th bracha, because the teshuva ashivenu is taka before, but the refuah that comes from the teshuva is the 8th bracha. So why did the Chachamim establish that the bracha, 8th bracha, is the bracha refuah that is from tshuva? The zeh refuah kavuha bishminis, the fact that you set it up on the 8th, hu al derech mila shenitna bishminis. So that parallels, just like mila was given on the 8th day. So we said before that Mila on the 8th day means that it's higher than Hishtalshalus. So the similar thing is the Refa'enu, the Tshuva, and the healing of the world that comes through Tshuva, through the fixing, comes from higher than Hishtalshalus, comes from the level of Shminis. In any event, we see in these both Mila and also Tshuva, they all come Shmini. And this Shmini is connected to 8, which is a similar level. And this is also fits in. And the Rebbe is going to bring out that we're going to see that all this is on the lower level of Shmini, of higher than Ishtalshalus. And it goes and goes. There's higher, more, even more higher than. We start off on the ground level of Shmini, of, in this case, we're talking about healing of Tshuva and the Bris Milah, which is the first level of Shmini that we're talking about. And then we're going to see there's higher levels. And the highest level is going to be the Yom Kippur, Achas L'mayla V'Sheva L'mat. Let's see. V'zeu, this also coincides, Sheshiva Yomim Koidim Yom HaKippurim Mafrishin Kohen Gadol Mebeser. That it says for 7 days before Yom Kippur, you would separate the Kohen Gadol from his home, from his wife, and he would be separated. And also V'chol Shivas Hayomim Margilin Oisoi Ba'avodos. And for 7 days you would train him to do the Avodah. This is why, because Kishivas Hayomim Heim Bechinas Ishtalshelus. That's the level of Ishtalshelus. The Yom HaKippurim is the 8th day, so it follows. So there's 7 and 8. Yom HaShmini Shel Achri Shivas Hayomim, the 8th day of Yom Kippur, which is after the 7 days, Hu L'mayla Mishtalshelus. So Yom Kippur alone is higher than Ishtalshelus because it follows the 7. It's also 8, just like we were saying before that the Refuah Tshuva is in the 8th bracha. This is also the 8th day after the 7 days of preparation. But also the Rebbe said, also the level of 8, V'zeu gam inyan shmoina ha'azoyis b'yom HaKippurim. Also the idea of 8, which we have the 8 sprinklings of Yom Kippur. Because over there we have achas l'mayla v'sheva l'mata. 1 goes sprinkled towards the top and 7 goes towards the bottom. Achas shel-l'mayla mehasheva, when we have achas higher than sheva, not achas after sheva, higher than sheva, he bechinas achas sho'alti, I ask for achas, or as achas yenosi. These are 2 achas which are unique. So the Rebbe will doesn't elaborate over here in the level of achas, but this is an achas. But I will explain now how the 7 hazoyas are a higher level of shmini because the achas comes before the Shabbat. Move on. So from this we understand the bishmini shalamayla mihishtalshlus kamadargis. In the shmini that comes above ishtalshlus, there are many levels. Shmini de milah. You have the 8th day of milah. Valderech zeh the kodesh hakadoshim. The 8th day of milah and the 8th day of kodesh hakadoshim are a similar level because shaknisa lekodesh hakadoshim here we say you can go in there through milah. That means that milah elevates the Kohen Gadol to the level of kodesh hakadoshim. So the kodesh hakadoshim milah is a similar level. That shows us that the level of kodesh hakadoshim is similar to milah. And then we have shmini de tshuva, that we're saying the 8th bracha for refuah, the tshuva that brings refuah. That level of 8 is higher from shmini de milah. Why is that higher than shmini de milah? Because milah is a mitzvah. Tshuva fixes mitzvahs. The one that fixes is higher than what it fixes. Shmini de milah, shmini de tshuva shenayla yeser mishmini de milah. The milah he mitzvah. Milah is a mitzvah. Utshuva shemechaperes al inyonim shepogmu b'toiro mitzvahs, and tshuva which atones for, it wipes away, it fixes the blemishes in Torah mitzvahs. Hilamayla mit Torah mitzvahs, that's higher than Torah mitzvahs. Kidel kamon sivches, avzilera sivches. So you have the shmini of tshuva. You have shmini of milah and kodesh hakadoshim, and then you have the shmini of tshuva, which is higher than the shmini of milah. And then you have shmini de Yom HaKippurim. the fact that Yom Kippur is also Shmini, and we said that the 7 days preparation, then you come to Yom Kippur, that aid is higher than regular tshuva, because Yom Kippur we know is higher than the Aseret Yisrael tshuva, higher than tshuva. That's the day of tshuva. Shah tshuva de Yom Kippurim. Hinailis Yesher Mea tshuva de Kol Hashana. Tshuva of Yom Kippur is higher than tshuva all year. Gamma tshuva de Aseret Yisrael tshuva, even from the tshuva of the 10 days of tshuva. So it has to be that the tshuva b'chlal is from the higher level, from the level of Shmini, Refuah, Masakin, but tshuva of Yom Kippur is higher. Shalochein Yom Kippurim was man tshuva lakoil, quoting the Rambam. Man tshuva is for everybody. And then we come to finally within Yom Kippur the avodah of the Yom Kippurim in the Kodesh Hakadoshim. B'Yom Kippurim atzmai shmoina ha'azoyis shebekodesh Hakadoshim. We have these 10 sprinkles, which was in the Holy of Holies. Achas l'maylo v'sheva l'mata, one towards the top, 7 towards the bottom. Sheha achas hi lifnei hashiva. Over there, achas comes before the shiva. That's why we say achas l'maylo v'sheva l'mata. First achas and then the shiva. What's the difference? The Rabbi explains between when you start with the achas l'maylo, or the achas comes after the 7. After achas, after the 7 means that the avodah of ishtalshelus first brings about that level of 8. So the 8, which is higher, has a connection to ishtalshelus. But when we start with the achas, that means it's not connected to the sheva, and then it's nimshach into the sheva, but it is nimshach something which is totally higher than them. And that's why the Kohen Gadol no Adam could be there after the avodah. Shloimar, the Shmini shel acharei shiva, that when you have Shmini that follows 8, hu gilu shel amaylo mishtalshelus shenimshach la'acharei v'alidei onyonim l'ishtalshelus. That is a revelation from above ishtalshelus that extends after and through the inyonim of ishtalshelus. So the fact that there is an impact of ishtalshelus that brings to the Shmini, umizeh shamshochas gilu zeh hu alidei ha'inyonim de ishtalshelus. The fact that we draw down this revelation through matters of ishtalshelus, muchach shegilu zeh shaykh l'ishtalshelus. Then it means that it's evident that this revelation has a connection to ishtalshelus, and through ishtalshelus we bring down that higher than ishtalshelus. But when we talk about va'achas shelifnei hasheva, one that comes before 7, hu gilu shelamayla mihishtalshelus, that's a revelation of higher than ishtalshelus, shelamayla mishaychus l'ishtalshelus, which is beyond having a connection to ishtalshelus. It doesn't come through ishtalshelus; it comes before ishtalshelus. Ella shel achri zeh nimshach hagilu b'ishtalshelus. But then it comes down the revelation in ishtalshelus, which is Sheva Shel Achrei Achas, the 7 that follow the Achas. Kedlukamon Siv Zayin, as later in Siv Zayin. V'apizeh Yuvan Haltam Al Zeh Shebechol Odom Lo Yiyeh Udavke Bevoy Lechaper B'Kodesh. Now we can understand the reason why we say Kol Odom. Also, the Malachim cannot be there. Only when he comes to atone and not before, because we're seeing now that you're reaching a much higher level through the Hazoya, the Achas L'maylo. Relative to the revelation that was in the Kodesh HaKadosh on its own, Shu al derech Shmini de Mila, which is like the Shmini of Mila, because we're saying you need the Mila to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So what is Shmini de Mila? Shmini de Mila, Shmini Shachar Shiva. It comes 8 after 7. You have 7 days, and then the 8th day is the Bris, is the Mila. So that means it's a level of higher than Ishtalshlus that comes through Ishtalshlus. L'maylo mi Ishtalshlus sheshayich li Ishtalshlus. It's higher than Ishtalshlus, but it's connected to Ishtalshlus. And therefore, yesh nisinas mokan lemitzias. There is still room giving place for mitzias. So that level that was in Kodesh HaKadoshim still allows for the Malachim to be in the Omer. By the Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim b'Kodesh HaKadoshim. But through the avoid of the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur and Kodesh HaKadoshim, Nimshach Hagilu de L'mayla Mishtalshlus. That brings the revelation of Mishtalshlus. Shalamayla Mishaychus L'Ishtalshlus. It's not only is it higher than Ishtalshlus, but it's doesn't even have a connection to Ishtalshlus. L'gabe Gilui Zeh Kol Odom La'iyah. When it comes to this Gilui, then nobody can be there. Afilu Oisam Shedmus Pnei Pnei Odom. Even those who Pnei Pnei Odom, the Malachim can't be there either. Because over there you're bringing down a level of higher than Ishtalshlus, which has no connection to Ishtalshlus. And therefore, at the time of the Avoid of the Kohen Gadol, is V'chol Odom Lo Yiyeh. So, the Rebbe explains that these Giluyim that are brought down into the world and how through Tshuva higher than the world, and it's going to go a detailed explanation. But first, to summarize this, the Rebbe says that the world is Elikim, is Teva. Mitzvahs are mitzvahs Hashem. They are Megale Hashem in Teva, in the world. Hashem, Elikim is Bigmatria HaTeva, so the Megale Hashem. But when a person fails to do the mitzvahs Hashem, he has to do tshuva. Because the tshuva brings you to the level of higher than Ishtalshlus and Kapora. It brings down from the level of Anoichi, which is higher than Ishtalshlus. So normally it's Havaya Elikecha. You bring down Havaya to bring Elikecha. But if you made a sin, committed a sin, then you have to do tshuva. Tshuva, you have to reach to Anoichi to become Hashem Elikecha. So this is the level of Yom Kippur, when there's tshuva, the avoid of the Yom Kippurim lechaper. At that level, he taps into the level of Anoichi. That's a level which is totally higher than Ishtalshlus. Let's look inside Gimel. V'yuvan zeh b'hagdim ma'asher kosuv. We'll understand this what's by introducing the pasuk ha-mitzvah hazois asher Anoichi mitzabecha. Over there it talks about the mitzvah of tshuva. And the pasuk says that this mitzvah, it says Anoichi mitzavcha. We'll see. Other mitzvahs, we call them mitzvahs Hashem. Hashem is mitzvah. Hashem tells you. But this mitzvah, we're saying it's a mitzvah which Anoichi mitzavcha. Anoichi means the higher level even than Hashem. So he says the chol mitzvahs nikroim mitzvahs Hashem. All mitzvahs are called mitzvahs Hashem from Havaya. But this mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of tshuva, Anoichi mitzavecha, Anoichi. When it says I, who is I? Anoichi misha Anoichi. That's I, whoever I am, which means you don't have a name, you don't have a description, which means Shalamaylam Havaya, which is higher than Havaya. Not like mitzvahs where are mitzvahs Hashem. This is tshuva, which is higher. So what is the idea? The inyan ha-mitzvahs ulahamshich gilu shem havaya b'olam. What is the idea? Mitzvahs are to draw down the revelation of havaya, name havaya in the world. The bria sa elam hi m'shem elikim. The creation of the world comes from the name elikim, which elikim b'gematria hatava. Elikim has the same numerical value as hatava, which means elikim, nature, that's the world is nature. By day ha-mitzvahs Nimshach ba'olam gilu shem havaya. Through mitzvahs we draw down into the world the revelation of havaya shalamayla mahatava, which is higher than nature. So we bring down higher than nature in tava. Where is it revelation? We say we reveal through mitzvahs. It starts the revelation by the person. The person who does the mitzvah gets the revelation of the Shem Havaya, and through the person it goes to the world. But that means that the Shem Havaya is revealed into the world. The Iker Hagilu da Havaya Shaldei Kiyum HaMitzvahs. The main revelation of the Havaya which comes through Kiyum HaMitzvahs who ba'adnu shemekayim HaMitzvahs is in the person that fulfills the mitzvahs. And through the person, that revelation goes to the world. And that's why the first saying of Matan Torah in the Pasuk, what did Hashem said? Anoichi Hashem Elikecha. So first, Rebbe is going to explain Hashem Elikecha, and then we need Anoichi. She'inyan ha-mitzvahs shenitnu b'Matan Torah hu sha'avaya yi Elikecha. So Hashem Elikecha is that we need Hashem to become Elikecha. Elikecha is nature to recognize. It's not the nature, but it's Hashem. Hashem is Elikecha. So, how is it that through mitzvahs we can bring the Shem Havaya into the world? So, we will see when a person doesn't do an Aveda and he's just doing mitzvahs, he's straight, so then you can bring Havaya into the world easily, into Tava. Why? Because l'chatchila, the way it was meant is that the Elikim is not to block Havaya, but to allow for a Gilu Shem Havaya. That's only if you do things straight. But if you made a mistake, then it becomes a hardship to bring Havaya into Elikecha. Then you need Anoichi. Let's look inside. Ze shal yidei ha-mitzvahs efsher lahamshich ba'olam. Gilu Shem Havaya, the fact that through mitzvahs we can draw down into the world the revelation of Shem Havaya. Hagam shehis havus ha'olam hi'ayidei Shem Elikim shemaylim u'mastir al Shem Havaya. Even though the world is created to Shem Elikim that blocks the world, how could we say mitzvahs Hashem to bring it down Havaya Lekecha? Hu lefi shekavonas ha'helam the Shem Elikim l'chatchila. Because the intent of the Shem Elikim from the beginning, it was created in such a way that when you do Torah mitzvahs, you should be able to bring down the revelation of Havaya. That's the way it should be. Even Elikim, the Shem Elikim, that the Elikim made the world, but it made the person should be Yoshar. Straight meaning to bring down Shakavona, to bring down the Eibishter in the world. Shakavona bishavus Shem Elikim. Elikim also. They're saying, what is the intention of Ishavus Shem Elikim? Is sha'odom al-yidei kiyum ha-mitzvahs yamshich liyos yoshor yechzu ponemer. Straight to see your face, Odom Yoshor. So when Elikim made the Odom Yoshor, that the person should be Yoshor yechzu ponemer, should see the Eibishter, should see through, to see Havaya through it. Shalamata yiagilu kamay lamaylo. That below should be the revelation just like above. Which means that in the Teva, in the Elikim, as Elikim, as Adam Yoshar, that the person should be able to see Panema, Yoshar as a Panema, to see godliness below like above. So there should be the Gilu Havavaya in Teva. So it's not surprising that Havaya comes down to Elikim. That's his Yosher. Yechzer Pnei Ma'aseh Elikim Asodom Yosher. However, the pasuk continues with what happens. So when people would do mitzvahs and they would realize that it's Hashem in control, not the tava, that's the way it's created. But then the pasuk continues, "V'kasher heima bikshu cheshbeinis rabim." But they made many calculations. They thought that the tava, that they can outsmart, they can do. They're looking for all kinds of calculations, many calculations to beat the system. They don't appreciate that it's Havaya Yosher. They think it's Elikim. Hepech Kavonas Abriya. That's opposite the Kavonas Abriya. So over here, it's not so easy anymore to bring down the Shem Havaya once we messed it up and we gave credence to the Elikim versus Yosher seeing Hashem Havaya. So in order to extend the revelation of the Shem Havaya on the person, and through the person in the world, so now we need Hamshacha from Anoichi Shalamayla Mahavaya. And now we need Hamshacha Anoichi, which is higher than Havaya. So now we need Tshuva. The Hamshacha Zu, he Alidei HaTshuva Shalamayla Mahamitzvahs. We need a new Hamshacha through Tshuva, which is higher than mitzvahs, which comes from Anoichi, in order to be able to bring down Hashem in the world. We need to fix it now. We need to come on to the Noichi. We can't say, okay, I'm failed, now I'm doing good. No, you need to do also tshuva. The tshuva is to help you bring down, and the Havaya should become a lekecho, like the pasuk says. Shuva Yisrael, return, meaning to do tshuva. You didn't do tshuva ad Havaya lekecho. Till Hashem will become a lekecha, you need to do tshuva for Hashem to become a lekecha. Ki choshalta b'avinecha. Since you have stumbled on your sin, you can't make havaya lekecha until you do tshuva. That's why we need tshuva Yisrael. Shebichdei sheyiyah havaya lekecha la'achri choshalta b'avinecha. In order havaya lekecha should be havaya lekecha after you have stumbled in your sin. Ein maspik kiyum hamitzvahs shemekan ulabo. It's not sufficient just to do mitzvahs from here and on, as you were doing before. Hashem Elokecha b'tzorich li yeshuva Yisrael. We have to return. So that's why we need to be mamshich from a higher place. So this explains a little bit what we're saying, that Teshuvah and Yom Kippur comes from a higher level, so that we're mamshich to such a level so that the malachim can't be in the Beis Hamikdash through the avodah of the Yom Kippurim of lechaper b'kodesh of the Kohen Gadol, because now we're talking about being mamshich the level of Anoichi, the level of Atzmus into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, as the Rebbe will continue to explain in detail in Ois Dalet. So here the Rebbe brings down in Ois Dalet what the sages tell us about tshuva, to understand really how far and how deep tshuva needs to go. Dalet. To understand the idea in more detail, Yuvan Bahagdi Mashom Razal will understand it by introducing first what our sages of blessed memory said. So there was a question that was presented to four different entities: what to do if you sinned? What's the resolution? How do you fix what you're sinning? So Sholu lechochma, they asked wisdom. And as the Rebbe will explain, this is chochma da'atzilus, or maybe not even chochma da'atzilus itself, but the chochma of malchus da'atzilus. But in either event, this is the higher level of chochma. So they asked logic. Hanefesh hachaitas bametis kaper. So we're not saying here, as the Rebbe will point out in a minute, the nefesh that sins what should happen to it. We're saying, Bameh Tiskaper. What could it do to receive its atonement? Because if it's not the level of Chokhmah, is not a plain logic can tell you nothing. You can't help it. But no, there's an answer over here. What to do? So we asked Chokhmah, we asked the Chokhmah of Atzilus, the Chokhmah of the Malchus Atzilus, Hanefesh Achatas Bametis Kaper. The sinning soul, what does it do to receive atonement? V'amra. So what was the response from Chokhmah? Hanefesh Achatas Itomus. That the sinner soul should die. If it dies, it'll get its atonement. And as the Rebbe will explain this, Sholul in Nevuah, so they asked prophecy, what did it do to atone? V'amra, and the prophecy said, Chatortim tirdevra, let their evil chase them, which means there'll be pain, that they will be suffering for their sins, and that's how they will atone for the sin. And then Sholu Torah, they asked Torah, what should be done to Amra? Yov should be Osham Yiskaper, like it says in the Torah, bring an Osham, a Korban Osham, sacrifice. By bringing the Korban, you get atonement. Sholu LaKodesh Baruch Hu, and when they asked HaKodesh Baruch Hu Omar what to do, so he says, Yaseh Tshuva Yiskaper. He says, do Tshuva, and it will be atoned for. You don't need to die. You don't need Yisurim. You don't even need a Korban. Do Tshuva, and you're atoned for. Ado Diksif. That's why it says, Toiv v'yosher havaya, that good and straight is havaya. Al kein yorech hatoim badorech. That's why he teaches the sinners the way, the path of teshuvah. As the Rebbe will teach, it's Hashem's goodness. It's not Hashem's kindness. It's Hashem's goodness that the Eibishter accepts everybody, and they can have the atonement. Doing teshuvah, everybody's accepted. So the Rebbe explains now, why does Chochmah say that if you die, that will bring atonement for the soul that sins? It is Chochmah because even Chochmah is higher than the light which dresses up in the world. It's higher than Ishtalshlus. Because of the world, there could be no atonement. You cannot fix it up. Even if you die, it wouldn't help you. It's not a kapore. I mean, just you die without a kapore. But the fact that it says that you could have a kapore, meaning that Chochmah is still higher than Ershem Islabish Ba'olam. Shemitzada Ershem Islabish Ba'olam, because of the world that dresses, the light that dresses up in the world. Since the sin is contrary to the creation of the world, the Eibishter created the world to do Torah mitzvahs, and you did the opposite. So it's actually is kaparazeh. There's no atonement for that. Nothing to do. The fact that from the Chokhmah there could be an atonement for the soul that sins, who ki ha-Chokhmah hi l'maylo me'olam, is because Chokhmah is higher than world. So from that perspective, there could be an atonement. Even though when we talk about Chokhmah here, we're not talking Chokhmah Tato, lower level of Chokhmah, not Chokhmah Ilah, which would be the which would be Chokhmah of Atzilus, as the Svira of Atzilus of Chokhmah. But here we're talking about Chokhmah Tato, Chokhmah Shebe Malchus, the lower level within Malchus. Haragama Chokhmah Shebe Malchus ilamayla ma Malchus atzma. But the Chokhmah of Malchus is higher than Malchus itself. So Malchus may be within Mislabish Ba'olam from Malchus, but this is Chokhmah Shebe Malchus, which is not Mislabish Ba'olam. Elo Shemitzad Chokhmah. So therefore there is a kapara, but Mitzad Chokhmah from the perspective of logic, hakapora hi de miso. How logic says that the atonement is through death, pirud hanefesh ma'aguf, to separate the soul from the body. How do you make up for that? Because this is, in a way, the Rebbe is going to explain, this is measure for measure. Because the Havaya and Elikim are like a soul and a body. And by doing this sin and not the Kavanah, you separated the Havaya from Elikim. So therefore, your soul and body, which is the Oyer and the Kalim, should be separated. It explains. That this solution for atonement to death, to separate the Nefesh Ma'aguf, is measure for measure. As we said before, mitzvahs bring down Havaya and Elikim. So when we go, the Elikim, who shoyresh hakelim, Elikim is the root of the vessels. Shem dugmas haguf, they are similar to the body. They are the recipient, the kelim, that contain the oir. V'oir the Havaya shenimshach behem, the oir of Havaya that goes into the kelim. Shenimshach dugmas chayis hanefesh. That's similar to the vitality of the soul that vitalizes the body. Since through his sin he caused that the gilu of Havaya should not come down to Lekim. Therefore, what's his punishment? And what does it mean, punishment? We're not talking just punishment. We're talking about an atonement over here. Separating the soul from the body. Measure for measure. He separated Havaya from Elikim. The Chai is the oil from the Keli. So the person's guf, which is similar to the Kelim, is separated from the Neshama, which is the oil. So that's mitzad chochmah. Mitzad hanevuah, shi benetzach v'hoid. And from the nevuah is a higher level than the level of chochmah tatov, that's malchus. We're talking about netzach v'hoid, which is prophecy, comes from netzach v'hoid of Atzilus. So nefesh achatas miskaperes gam al yidei yisurim. So it can also be atoned through pains. You don't need a full separation from the body of the and the soul, but also through Yisurim it can also be accomplished. But what is the novelty in the response of the Torah? And certainly that it says bring a korban, and certainly the response of the Eibishter, do tshuva. Shakapora hi al de korban tshuva, that the kapora is through korban tshuva. And you don't need pains. You don't need afflictions to get your atonement. That's what the Torah and the Eibishter said. And what's the difference within the Torah's response and the Eibishter's response? The difference between the response of Torah to the response of Kadosh Baruch Hu. Because in a way, bringing a korban is also an atonement, is also a tshuva, because when you bring a korban, you need to do tshuva at the same time. So how is the tshuva of Torah with the korban different than the tshuva that the Eibishter says? It's also tshuva. The korban can only atone if you do tshuva together with the korban. So what's the difference? So the Tzemach Tzedek explains in the above mamer that from this perspective of Torah, which is the wisdom of Kadosh Baruch Hu, alidei hatshuva nasim hasdoinus rakish gogis. Tshuva, from the Torah perspective, the intentional sins becomes like accidental sins. It's tshuva, But the tshuva makes it accidental, and then you bring a korban. The korban can atone. A korban doesn't come for intentionals because the tshuva doesn't makes it into accidental to shgogus, and then the korban can atone for it. But the mitzad hakodesh baruch hu shalamayla ma'atoiro. But mitzad the kodesh was higher than Torah. Idea tshuva miskaprin hasdoinus. Through tshuva, the intentionals are atoned for. Even this doinus, we don't need. It's not like the korban only on shgogus. The Yisaitim is more than just being atoned for. Shenepochim lezuchuyos, they turn into merits. That's the level which is mitzad HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we see how powerful the level of teshuva is, that it touches, that it can turn everything around. The Rebbe is explaining the details of what teshuva accomplishes. So api amuva leil siv gimel, the teshuva hi ba'er in sof shel amayla meishtalshalus. That we brought down that teshuva is in the Erin Sof, which is higher than Ishtalshalus. Yes, Loimar. So we're going to explain the difference between Torah l'mayla mi'ishtalshalus, response of Torah of Korban, and the response of the Eberster, which is even for his doinus. Because in higher the Ishtalshalus, Mitzad Atzmus forgives everything, which Mitzad Torah, which is not at that level. The fact, the reason why, also from the Torah perspective, Teshuva helps as doinus yur kishgogis, that this doinus should be like accidents. Even though that Torah is in Chochma, Hishtalshlus hu. So how could Torah? Chochma didn't agree to that, but Torah, which is in Chochma, which is Ishtalshlus, how does it agree for Tshuva, for at least Ikiyu Kishgogish, who can be Chochma Shoyra Eid Sof Shalamayla Ma Chochma? Because within Chochma, the rest, the Eid Sof, which is higher than Chochma. Valderech Zeh, Hu Benegeya LeTorah. So that's Torah as it's in the level of Chochma, is connected to the Eid Sof. And similar is also Benegeya LeTorah, as Torah descends into the midos of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes in Atzilus, lowers from the level of Chochma. So it also has a connection to above, because Torah is in Tiferes, which is the middle line. Tiferes goes up to Kesed. So therefore it goes to higher than Ishtalshalus. Elo, but they're still limited for making it kishgogis. Not like the Eber's Torah, Elo she'a'er shelamayla mishtalshu b'Torah, the light of higher ishtalshu of Torah, kivun shu nimshach b'ishtalshus, since it does descend into ishtalshu b'chochma b'talmud Torah, b'chochma b'tiferes, sorry. Chochma and the level the Rebbe says, and they're both connected. That's with the measure and limitation. L'chein hakoyach shebetshuva metzad oirin sof shebetoyru rakshi ukishgogis. So that's why the power of tshuva from the oirin sof, that is in Torah, because it's still limited and measured. It's only to make it kishgogis. Umayne hakodesh baruch hu hamshochas oirin sof. But Hashem's response is bringing down the Ein Sof higher than Ishtalshlus. As it's in the AS, which is higher than coming down Ishtalshlus. The this Hamshoch is higher than any measure and limitation. A higher level of tshuva, which comes from the response of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, even the intentional are forgiven. Not only are they become like shogeg, they are atoned even though they're mazed. The Yisayim Mizu, and even more, they're turned into merits. So As the Rebbe explains the different levels over here of where we reach in from the level of tshuva which comes mitzad Torah. And that tshuva helps, but it's still limited because it comes down through chokhmah and through tiferes, which are limited, even though it reaches above to higher. But the level of Shol HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's a revelation of a higher level over there. Even Zdonis are atoned for, and the Gogas are, and the Zdonis actually are turned also into Zechayos. And the Rebbe will continue to explain this later on, also how, when it comes from the perspective from Hashem, then Hashem forgives everything, as we'll continue further in the mamer.